Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Tuesday, November 5th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Purdue game is in 4 days. The game against Michigan in 25 days. One little piece of housekeeping to let you know about before we get into the meat of today's show. The Buckeyes game against Northwestern being played at Wrigley Field next Saturday. Not this Saturday, but next Saturday. That will be a noon kickoff on Big Ten Network. So you can look forward to that. An early day at Wrigley Field. So that will be that is now official. So go ahead and mark your calendars for that. All right, now, coming up before the Purdue game, coming up before the Northwestern game, coming up before the game against Michigan is the first college football playoff rankings reveal that is coming up tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern. Tony, Kevin, and I will have our usual live show for that, breaking down what we learned from the committee, what it might mean moving forward. Today, we're going to do one last projection of what the field might look like before we find out for real where things truly stand on Tuesday night. Going to be using the AP poll to do that. I'm going to be doing that with our buddy Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com. Tony, I'll just run through the rankings right now, the top 12 teams based on that AP poll. Number 1, Oregon, the projected Big Ten champ right now. Number 2, Georgia, the projected SEC champ right now. Number 3, the seed would be Miami, the projected ACC champ right now. Number 4 would be BYU, the projected Big 12 champ. 5 seed would be Ohio State. 6 Texas, 7 Penn State, 8 Tennessee, 9 Indiana, 10 Notre Dame, 11 Alabama, 12 Boise State. You know, I know there's going to be a lot of talk about whether Ohio State would be better off winning or losing the Big Ten championship game, because that's a very interesting conversation. We'll get into why in a minute. But I think more than anything else, my takeaway is, holy crap, Indiana's in the projected college football playoff field right now.
That, to me, just thinking about that today, and is amazing, because that's something that, all of the names that we're seeing that could be in this thing. I mean, SMU is not far from being part of this thing. Like, if they win the ACC championship, I mean, just imagine, Army or whatever, like all of these teams that are still in it. Like, what if they do get in it and you're looking at it like, hey, there's Indiana, there's SMU, there's Army. Like, what kind of world are we living in? And it's like, it's pretty interesting. And it's not something that any of us expected. It's not something that could be predicted, which means you can't predict it next year. You can't predict it the year after. And I don't think that's such a bad thing when we have years past where it's like, I'm going to give you these 3 teams. I'm going to take the field. How do you feel about your situation? I'm like, I'll stick with these 3 teams. Thank you.
Yeah, it is definitely a wild race for this college football playoff field right now. SMU is the first team out right now. They would be 13th in the AP poll. We'll see where they actually are in the college football playoff rankings. Followed by LSU, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, Iowa State, the 5th team out there. So with that field as it is, that would set up number 12 Boise State at number 5 Ohio State in the first round. Number 11, Alabama at number 6, Texas. Number 10, Notre Dame at number 7, Penn State. And number 9, Indiana at number 8, Tennessee. Ohio State going in and having Boise State as its first round game. Again, we've talked about this on and off a bunch this year about, the 5 seed might not be a bad place to be. But if you're number 5, Ohio State, and you get Boise State in the first round, and then you're looking at a second round matchup against BYU, you got to figure you're probably about a 3-touchdown favorite in both of those games. That's not a bad path to the semifinals.
And all you have to do is beat Indiana and lose to Oregon. It's like, all I have to do is lose, and I get this path. I think that's the losing part. You're going to have a conversation with Buckeye fans. Are you okay losing to Oregon and getting these 2 positions? Or, because I think they'd take, certainly anybody would take the 12 and the 4. And then even after that, if you get past that, the number 1 seed would be a team that you have faced 2 times already in Oregon, ideally, theoretically. And you'd sure like the 3rd crack at them, I'm assuming.
Oregon, I think, would even more so be pretty comfortable with if you win out and then you lose the Big Ten championship game and you're the number 1 team going into championship weekend, you're not falling any further than 5. So they are even more in a spot where if you think that's the path, a loss in Indianapolis is not the worst thing. You got to get there, but it wouldn't be the worst thing. One thing I thought was interesting, all the talk about the Big Two conferences this year, this first round field, this field overall, 12 teams, 4 from the SEC, 4 from the Big Ten, 1 independent Notre Dame, 1 from the ACC, 1 from the Big 12, 1 from the Mountain West. So the Big Two get 4 each. The rest of college football gets 4 teams. So that is how the field would shake out, how the first round would shake out. Now, the second round, the quarterfinals, these are the traditional bowl matchups. So the Ohio State-Boise State winner would play BYU in the Fiesta Bowl. That is the New Year's Eve game this year. Then the Alabama-Texas winner would play Miami in the Peach Bowl. That's the one that kicks off around noon on New Year's Day. And the Tennessee-Indiana winner against Oregon in the Rose Bowl. Notre Dame-Penn State winner against Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. But just in terms of the matchups themselves, you look at Oregon, you look at Georgia, those teams probably win those games. Ohio State versus BYU, you're taking Ohio State. Texas against Miami, you're probably taking Texas, although Miami is ranked ahead of Texas right now. So for the next round, we're going to advance teams based on who's the higher ranked team, not the higher seeded team. So Miami is technically higher seeded than Texas. We'll advance Miami out of that. But boy, the Miami Texas game is the one I think that is the most intriguing to me, just in terms of just the pure on-field matchup there.
And that one feels like take the over on that, just because Miami can seemingly score on anyone because they have to, because they're giving up points and that they never stop trying to score. And Texas has all kinds of offensive weaponry as well. And not that you often need it against Miami. So what they do have would be even better. I'm looking at this, and these are all kinds of entertaining and fun possibilities. Even back around Penn State getting Notre Dame at home. Like, I know you're upset about losing to Ohio State, but if you can get to host like a Notre Dame in your place for a playoff game, I mean, that's, it's going to be okay. Now win it. Go win it, though.
Yeah, that's a winnable first round game for Penn State, but it's also a winnable first round game for Notre Dame. So that looks like the opposite of the irresistible force and the immovable object. That is the resistible force and the movable object. Penn State in a big game and Notre Dame in a big bowl game. One of them has to win. One of those narratives will have to die in that game. We don't know which one it is, but it will be one of them. Next up, the semifinal games. And based on what we were told last week on the college football playoff call, it is just based on geography. So the number 1 team, Oregon, is closer to the Cotton Bowl. So they would go to the Cotton Bowl to face Ohio State / Boise State / BYU. Georgia would go to the Orange Bowl, where they could conceivably have to play Miami in their home stadium. So Georgia versus the Miami / Texas / Alabama winner there. And then the winners of those would go to the national championship game in Atlanta. But, it's interesting. We've had all this upheaval all season. And if you look at it, the 4 teams that we looked at before the season and thought it's going to be Ohio State and Oregon and Georgia and Texas, and those are going to be the 4 teams in the semifinals. And they've had this great, crazy, fun season, and we could be looking at those 4 teams that we all expected in the semifinals meeting in the semifinals.
Yeah, still, it was a fun season, right? I mean, we got to see plenty of upsets and including all of these teams playing against each other. So, I had somebody tell me before the season, an NFL person, say that the 3 most talented teams were Georgia, Ohio State, and Oregon. And, frankly, those 3 teams should end up where you, Tom, have them projected, where the AP has them projected. But it was still a fun way of getting there. And I mean, there's still over a month to go before we figure out where everybody ends up. But if it ends up with the normal teams, but we got there in a different way, I think that's still okay.
Yeah, well, I think this turns into the first couple weeks of this look like the start of March Madness, where everyone's incredibly excited and you get these wild potential upsets and you have, the Cinderella stories. I mean, I saw a tweet that it was Indiana, SMU, Colorado, and Vanderbilt are 4 of the worst teams in terms of winning percentage in the 21st century in terms of Power 4 conference teams. All of them are ranked this week. That is nuts. And Indiana potentially in the college football playoff, SMU potentially a Big 12. No, ACC. Sorry. Goodness, you got to remember which conference everyone's in. SMU. Why would I think they belong in the Big 12, Tony? Who's to say? Anyway, if SMU wins the ACC Conference Championship game, they're in the playoff. I mean, that is, it is going to be different. It is going to be exciting, though. It should be a lot of fun. So we will be back on Tuesday night with our live instant reaction show, sharing some insights, sharing some analysis as we sort of all learn together what the College Football Playoff Committee thinks they might want to do this week. All subject to change 7 days from now, of course. But it'll be interesting to see them kind of work through their process, get some answers potentially in terms of how this is all going to work. Because, boy, we could be headed for a wild final couple months of the season. So if you'd like to enjoy those final couple months of the season with us, a great place to do that would be at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That's where Tony, Kevin, and I cover the team. Mark covers recruiting. Got our whole team of X's and O's gurus there, making you a smarter football fan, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. If you want to check it out right now, we're running a sale. Your first month, just $4.99 that first month. We'll include the Michigan game. We'll include the lead up to the Big Ten championship game as well. Lots of exciting stuff happening there, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.